You can go to Tannehill Park?
Hey,
You ready to go?
Google.
All right. Well, she has spoken. We're going to take a little family outing today, and we're going to go to Tannehill State Park. We're getting dressed. It's a beautiful spring day here in Alabama. It's the last fire of the year, probably. It was a little chilly last night, but it has warmed on up to around 60 degrees today. Going to take my beautiful daughter down here, Adeline, which y'all have not met. Say hey. Say hey. Hey, yeah. Who just turned 2 here about a month or 2 ago, and my wife. So we're going to get out there and see if I can tell y'all a little bit about the history of the park, which it does have some Civil War history behind it, which is rather interesting. So we'll get back with you here in just a second. So a few cabins you can rent right through here. We showed up. This is a great state park. We're only a few miles from our house, actually. We come here all the time, but the history is really rich. When we get over to the furnaces here in a minute, I'll show it to you. Most of these were built 20, 30 years ago, and some of the buildings, like the refreshment stand over here that we're going to go to, it was actually moved here, but the furnaces have been around since the 1830s, but we'll get into that in just a second. Okay guys, we finally made it to the furnaces. They're rather impressive. Water wheel used to be over here to the side that had pipes that ran through to the blowers. You see the pipes around the outside of the furnace, and that was what the water wheel, like I said, pushed the air through there into the furnace and kept the fires hot. Over here is one of the cabins that they have moved in, and you can tell that the creek is on the far side, but they actually made a little channel right here for that water wheel that forced those blowers. So that's pretty neat. Anyway, so I'll get a little bit further into the history on this. It all started in around 1829, and it started out as a really small forge that began the production of iron in this particular area. It's actually one of the first forges from what I've researched. And iron at this time was necessary for making tools, pots, plows. By the way, I'll go ahead and tell y'all, this place is awesome mountain bike. We used to ride out here all the time. I've kind of got too old and fat to do that. Anyways, aside from that, the blast furnace was built in 1855 to meet the rising demand for cast iron. So, which was right in time for, you guessed it, the Civil War. The inner shell of this furnace, which is called the trestle, it was made with fiery clay because it can be shaped and can withstand great heat. And the heat in this thing can get could have got ridiculous at the time. The outer blocks are made out of a retaining wall for the trestle, and those blocks were actually mined, I believe, from like a quarry right in this general area off of that mountain that's kind of behind it. The furnace was fueled by charcoal made from hardwood trees in the area. So at one time I imagine it was probably pretty barren through here because they'd stripped all of the hardwood trees. Oh, there's my little girl and wife over there playing around. When enough of the iron had settled at the bottom of the trestle after being poured into the top, workers who had no protection from the great heat given off by the molten iron would remove the impurities. So I can't imagine being down there around 2,000 degree molten iron like those guys were back then. I mean, that's ridiculous. The shelter that's kind of on the right, we'll walk over here and talk about that. I'll kind of show you all around a little bit, get a little closer look. At one time you could actually go up there, and they let you, and they've kind of closed it off where you can't get up there anymore. We're trying to raise a little rock collector over here, but she's picking flowers. Isn't that right?
She dropped 2 rocks just to get a flower.
You dropped 2 rocks to get a flower. But anyways, over here, this building on the right is where they would allow the pure iron to flow from within the trestle into the molds in the sand. So there would actually be a sand pit right there on the right, which is pretty neat. The iron would harden into the shape of the mold. Between the furnace and the creek is where the water wheel was, which is what I was telling y'all about, which is pretty neat. And the pipes that I talked about, you cannot see them. They ran into the ground. Let me see. You can see the larger pipes right there. Let me get right here and see if I can see any of the smaller pipes to show y'all. Well, here's a neat little sign. We'll read that. Probably be more informative than me. Blower House, Roops Valley. Let's see. Iron Company. built under the supervision of Moses Stroop to supply air blast for Tannehill Furnace Number 1, 1859. This facility made use of blowing tubs and large water wheel. It remained in operation even after the furnaces number 2 and 3 were added in 1862 and equipped with a steam engine and hot blast stoves. This facility was burnt by federal cavalry March 31st, 1865 as a part of Wilson's raid. So, they kind of got a little bit of ahead of me on where I wanted to go with it, but I'll go ahead and we'll get into that part. So, this furnace was operated by 35 to 40 men. It ran 24 hours a day, all that it could. So it was, whenever possible, they wanted it running 24/7. So during the Civil War, the function of the furnace changed. So from it being used as for making stuff like we talked about in the beginning, agricultural equipment, marking tools, pots, plows, stuff like that, it changed over, and it had to supply the munitions to the Confederacy because they were so far behind the Union industrially. So this place was kind of confiscated and turned around into a place that was making the iron for, like I said, the Confederacy. So that's definitely interesting. And y'all probably heard me talk about before how Civil War history was not really strong in this area. This is one of the strongest areas besides Selma, Alabama, for that history. Anyways, we get back to it. So the iron that was made here was sent to Selma, where they made cannonballs, rifle barrels, and other munitions cast, all in the arsenal in Selma for much of the war. So in 1863, the furnace, which stands today to the right of the original site, was built under the direction of, let's see, his name was Saunders. I can't remember first name. Together, these 3 giant ovens supplied the South with more than 20 tons of heavy ordnance daily. So you have 20 tons of iron daily. I mean, that's a lot for 35, 40 men, even at 24 hours a day. It's ridiculous. On March 31st, 1865, troops of Sutherland, under the command of General James H. Wilson, which is also the same person that burned the University of Alabama at the time, which is kind of interesting, ended the production of these furnaces and set fire to everything that would burn. Thus, it destroyed the industry that would have gave birth a few decades later to the huge steel industry of Birmingham, which, if you're not familiar with Alabama, Birmingham is known as the Steel City. So, the original furnace here that we're looking at, let's go out here and take a look at it. As mentioned, was restored in the 70s. So, you can see how the rock's dark. When it goes lighter right there, that's all where it was restored, because whenever this was burnt down and destroyed, they only destroyed the top section. So in 1976, they restored it from there up. So that's pretty neat. So that's the history on the furnaces, a little history of the Civil War here. Now I'm going to show y'all inside this furnace. This one's actually opened up where you can kind of see into it. This would have led all the way to the top. Yeah, check that out. That is awesome. Very cool. So very neat piece of history. I highly recommend checking this out if you're in central Alabama. The park admission is $5 a piece to get in. Kids are free under a certain age. I want to say it's like 8 or something like that. They have an awesome campground here, some of the best mountain biking in the state, and they even do a trout tournament here once a year, which is pretty neat. Hey, you're on video. What are you doing? You're getting rocks?
She's still looking for rocks.
You're looking for rocks? Oh, okay. Right over here, I'll show y'all. This is pretty neat. You can't tell. You wouldn't know if you weren't out here frequently like we are. But there's a little pond right here, and the dam right here that's across. On the other side, a few years ago, the University of Alabama did an archaeological dig over there, and apparently that used to be the slave quarters for the people that worked at the furnace. So it's pretty neat. There was houses over there. They did a dig there, and they did a dig up there. And I think they found pottery, and they might have even found, I'll have to look back at the article and see. If I can find the article, I'll put it at the bottom of this video. Get back with you in a minute. Well, I lied. There's a bass right there. I don't know if y'all can see that. He's way out. I'm zoomed in, but he's probably a good 5-pounder at least. It's a good sized bass.
Bass.
He's so fat off all them tadpoles. That makes sense. Hide under those leaves.
Come here, baby. Look. Pick the flowers.
There it is. After scaring my wife, I'm pretty sure I'll be sleeping on the couch tonight. We go spray flowers. Everything's blooming here in Alabama. What do you got, Addie? Can I see your flowers?
So Dad, your flowers.
Oh, they're so pretty. They're almost as pretty as you. You're welcome very much. If you were out in the woods and you were very thirsty and you had no way to filter your water or boil it, that is about as good a water as you can drink. You see all the moss above it that it's filtered through? I bet you that's really good and cold right now too. I left my drink at the car if y'all can't tell. I appreciate y'all tagging along and letting me bore y'all with the history of this place, but I figured y'all get a kick out of it and maybe give you a place to come visit while you're in Alabama. If y'all enjoyed the video, please subscribe.